So great. We have a lot of good here. We have a very full agenda tonight. So we're gonna go through a number of things. Some of them are briefings at this point. I don't want, we'll kind of keep the conversation to a minimum, but I really want to make sure we have time for Pat and Mel. I think everybody met Mel last week. Okay.
Just table everything else.
Well, we have to go through some of the stuff to get it done. So, but I want to make sure that I just want everybody to know that if I stop a conversation and move us on to something else, I'm not picking on you. It's for hopefully I'm not being rude. Hopefully I'll do it in a way that's in the plan. Okay, the first thing is minutes. I'm hoping people had a chance to look at it. I did have one comment for one change, which would be to say that on the town survey update, that should discuss the community-wide survey that the committee would like to conduct rather than distribute, which I thought was a good change. Does anybody else have any other changes, modifications? No. Okay. Can I have a motion?
Motion to the minutes as amended.
Okay. Second. All right. Okay. Let me take a roll call on this. Corey.
He's nodding his head yes.
Okay. Thank you. Nikki?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Russell?
Yes.
Myrna? Yes. Matt?
Yes.
Okay. Eileen?
Yes.
Jess?
Yep.
Okay. That is universal. Great. Okay. The next topic we're going to discuss is the and public comment. We do have one member of the public here. Mark Smuckler, for those of you who don't know. He's precinct 7 on town meeting. Does anybody in public have anything they'd like to add? Okay, then we'll move right along. Civic Expo, very exciting. Coming up on the 14th, we are going to have a table and a couple of things we need to do. One is to decide who's going to sit at said table. We need to prepare a couple of materials, which is who are we, what are we doing, and then the idea was that maybe what we do is we have a quick survey with some general questions that people can, a couple of questions that people can just fill out, put in a box as kind of a very low-key public input opportunity. And so I asked both Patrick and Pat and Mel if they had any ideas for questions. So if that's something that people think would be a good idea, to kind of get people involved with us rather than just coming back and saying, oh yeah, who are you, what do you do, but actually engaging them in a conversation. There are a couple of questions that were put together. One is, what is your understanding of who's running town government? If we say mayor, we know we've got our work cut out for us. How can residents influence and participate in town government? Would be another potential question. What parts of Burlington government would you be interested in changing? That might be a question. What do you think? What do you think of when you think of governance in Burlington? How do you interact with Burlington's government? And what is Burlington's government best at? Those are some sample questions that came from our folks here. All open-ended, so people would just write their responses in. But I think what we would want to do, because we've got till the 14th, is get a little group together to talk about what questions we want to ask, and then to put together stuff. Like I did this last year. I brought a basket and put candy in it. That always got people to come over, right? So that was a good start. But we want to attract people to come to our booth. Do we have a sign saying our name that you're providing? Yes. Okay.
No.
Now everybody else does too. Thanks, Betsy. There will be, yeah, I think I'll print out just a 8.5 by 11 or like a half 8.5 by 11 that you can pull on it. Yeah, at the very least.
Okay.
We'll see how deep we can get.
Yeah, and as
You can bring your own on a big stick.
there you go. I have some poster board left over from another project that we can kind of put stuff on, and I've got an easel we can put stuff on, but it would be really helpful to have a couple of people volunteer to kind of work to get this together. I don't think it's a heavy lift, quite frankly.
do you mind if I share a quick idea that might make an even lighter lift? Post-it notes and the questions on something that's up, right? So that people can choose what question that they're answering. They can put the post-it note there, so you don't have to worry about printing anything. So all you have to do is prepare the sort of, if you put it on like one of those presentation boards, multiple presentation boards, you can just have different questions. And people can put the post-it notes up there.
Just a blank post-it note. That's the question you asked me.
And they put their answer on.
They're answering the questions that Betsy is talking about.
Right, so the question will be on the top, and then people would stick their post-it. It's kind of like a brainstorm.
Sort of, clearly.
I love that.
Well, and it's nice too, because then it doesn't make people feel pressured to have a conversation with somebody that might not want to.
Right.
And they can pick and choose. It's not like a big long survey. It feels more.
Yeah.
There also will be, just so people are aware, there's a bingo card. So it's like a human bingo sort of thing where people go to, it says like, find some group that influences how laws are made. And so you have to go and figure out the law making bodies and get a stamp. So every people have a stamp.
So what I would like now is not to solve it, but let's get some people who might want to volunteer just a couple, and also whether anybody is willing to sit at the table on that day. It's 5%. We could take shifts. We could take shifts. And we probably need, you probably need 2 people there all the time and then rotate through. So I guess, how many people would be able to attend and might be able to? Okay, so we have Eileen, Myrna, you're busy.
I will not be.
Steve, Jack, you're okay, Jack. Yes. And, okay, so what I'll do is I'll follow up with you guys, and I will send out those questions, and we can decide which ones. I don't think we want too many, but we take 3 or 4 that we think would be impactful for us to put on those boards so that people can put their post-its on.
Put something to give our website and that.
Yeah.
So do you want to be on a mailing list?
Corey typed that he was interested in volunteering as well.
Oh, Corey, okay, gotcha.
Oh, yeah, sign up sheet for the.
Okay, and, right, so I'm gonna let you guys put together something that you think would be helpful.
This is the Civic Expo Task Force that is something.
Oh, you are? Okay.
No, I'm asking you.
Oh, yes,
Clarifying.
I am. Yes, that is a true thing. So, and Russell, you can,
What am I doing? I just said Corey was fine. What do you need to do? What do you?
no, if you could, I know that there's like a website and all that kind of stuff.
The website, yeah.
If we could have an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that has that information on it, then we can put it on our, who we are and what we do for it. So it's like,
We will coordinate with Laura to do something like that.
that's fine.
Yeah, we'll have Laura hopefully voluntold to take the postcards you designed.
Mhm.
And just instead of front and back, look at the front and back.
Yeah.
Okay.
And she's expecting that.
Okay, good. So
Done.
thank you. So I'm putting you on the, okay. Okay, now, next is, town survey update. Patrick. Do I use this?
Sorry, didn't you?
No, I don't think so. Can I do it with a mouse? Nope. This is the mouse that looks.
Oh, it's very
Good share. So that Corey and BCAT.
Okay, where do I? Yes, please. Otherwise, I'm gonna give everybody a headache. As I want to. All right. All right, this is going to be really quick because this is, again, in the nature of a briefing, but I wanted to get everybody up to speed as to what's going on the survey. Because we need to ask for money to actually do this. Which way do I? How do you advance it? Okay.
You can right click and select next, I think, at the top.
Or all the way at the bottom.
Little secret arrows all the way to the bottom.
Mm,
You can also use the keyboard arrow. That's easy.
Yeah, I think I'm going to use the keyboard arrow. Keyboard's not working. Keyboard's not working. Okay. Oh, geez.
Now it's
Where is the, wait a minute, what change?
Do you want me to go back?
Yeah.
No,
Oh my gosh.
well, the weekend after that is,
Hello.
yeah, because this is a Wednesday anyway, so.
Okay. All righty.
Yeah, I do
Are
it.
we ready?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, you teacher. I know, well, I need to keep us on track. I'm not sure why that's
Yeah,
doing
let me
that.
try to fix that real quick, because otherwise.
It's going to be rapid depressing, and it's, let's go back to the first slide.
Won't be fancy with graphics, but it doesn't.
So, as you all know, we have town meeting coming up, in the end of this month. And part of what happens at town meeting is that if you want to do a project that costs money, you need to get approval of town meeting in order to get a budget. So timing being what it is, we have town meeting happening before, we really kick off the survey project. So, Jess and I, that's last. Okay, there, okay. Right there,
I'm gonna leave the mouse,
okay.
just don't move the mouse so that you don't lose the place of it. Just click the.
Okay. And you can't read it, Patrick, how do we get the people up top so they can read this one?
Can we move the mouse now?
Thank you.
Do we do this one? Yes.
Yeah, okay, great, okay. So, I did have a, meeting with the select board. I put together a summary, let me back up. So because we need to ask for money, the first thing we did was, Jess and I met with a couple of vendors that we knew did surveys, Collins being one, and then UMass Lowell being another. They did the native Government Review Committee town survey, which was a biggie, it was huge. And we talked to both. One of the questions I have received is why do a survey? And part of it is that our charter here as a group is to make sure we have an open, transparent process and that we, that the government is effective and responsive and approachable, all of those things. But how do you know that unless you ask the people for whom the government serves? So in order to do that, we need a survey. So there was a question about why have a survey. That's
Move
why.
the mouse.
Huh?
Move the mouse.
Oh, sorry. So there's nothing new here. Why we want to do it is, to gather information. It's Burlington residents that we're going to be reaching out to. And in order, so we have credibility, having independent third party is, I think, very important to this process, to give credibility to the process. And, we're going to learn a number of things of which we're talking about. So it'll help inform some of these decisions we're making. I think in the very beginning of this project, Pat and had outlined the fact that we can keep coming back as we learn new things about things with this. So in general, what we learned through our discussions with the different vendors is you want to have, it's got to be short because people don't have tolerance for long surveys. And you need to make sure you've got demographics involved so that you can identify who people, the groups are. And most of them would be closed-ended questions, for multiple choice. Take one of that applies to you. But there will be some open-ended questions as well. there are targets in terms of what percentage of the population you want to have respond, and that really depends on which group you're working with as to what we're looking for, because each group had a different methodology, but there is going to be a target. And then one thing that was very important is that we have the survey available in the languages of which our residents speak. And my understanding at this point is Spanish and Chinese are the two languages that we should be going for, but Patrick was going to check with Parent Square just to make sure that the schools have this information and we can leverage that. So in general, this is a scope of what the consultant would do in terms of designing the survey and translating it. The administration, they'll have a platform, so they'll administer it and do all the privacy stuff that we need to make sure that we're careful about, and then analyze the results and then do identifying trends and that sort of thing, and then doing a final presentation. A final presentation would be to this group, number one, and two, any other group that we take. So if we want them to do a presentation at a public forum or at a select board meeting or at a town meeting or whatever we could do, we could have them do that.
Written report.
There'd be a written report, and it would also be a PowerPoint presentation with people. The other thing that's good we need to realize is that promotional stuff is on us. So if we're going to do a postcard, we need to do a postcard, and if we have to post it, we have to pay for the postage and that sort of thing. Just in terms of what we identified as the general time frame of this, so that it kind of meets the parameters of the project, it would be to kick it off in March with the launch of the actual survey. And when I say kick it off, it means the questions need to be developed. That's a collaborative effort between the consultant, and what I'm proposing is that we have a subcommittee to work on with that. And then the analysis by the consultant would be in June, with presentation of findings in July, which would be helpful to us because we need to get ourselves ready for September town meeting. So it's tight, but it's, I think, doable given where we are today. So this is what we've done. We got 2 proposals. We got a quote from promotional advertising from our local electronic news. And then Eileen Sickler was a hero for me because she is really good at this financial analysis stuff, which is not my strong point. And so we did an apples to apples comparison as close as possible. And as you can see, the costs were within spitting distance of each other. So if you take a look at the article is asking for $20,000, which is pretty much right on target with what we were being told this part of the project was going to cost.
But if we have to pay postage extra,
No, that's already included.
that's what.
That's included in this. This is the apples to apples kind of thing. One of the organizations actually does that and posts it, the other didn't. So we had to normalize to make sure that what each organization was proposing was the same thing. So we knew what we were getting. So what happens next? Need a select board approval of this. I did an initial presentation to them before the holidays, and I'm doing that at the next select board meeting, which I'm not exactly sure is going to be supposed. Okay. And then bring it to town meeting. For town meeting, I did, John Denizio was really nice because this time frame has been crazy. He asked me yesterday if I wanted to have something in the package for backup for this article. And so I put it together yesterday. And,
Is this it?
huh?
Is it?
No, but it's a verbal version of that. And so that's going to go in with the package for town meeting, which is great. And so once it's approved, we're going to establish a subcommittee. I want you all to think about it. Anybody who wants to be on it. The subcommittee is going to establish, work with a consultant to get the questions. And then,
Yes.
you know, our internal communications people, which is Laura, in terms of how we're going to publicize this thing and get the word out and anything else that, you know, the consultant has a big chunk of this, but we do too, because this is a Burlington survey. So I want you to think about it. It will be a commitment. It won't be quite the commitment that the stakeholder survey has been. But you know, we'll be working with the consultant on that. But in order to do that, we need to get a budget approved. So we're not going to spend much time on that now. But I want to make sure that everybody is aware of it. And then for you town meeting members who are going to be there during town meeting, if people, you know, ask questions about what is this thing or whatever, you can fill them in on what we're up to. Okay.
I'm not sure if someone on the screen was saying hello.
Say again, please.
If somebody is,
Heard someone on online asking a question, but I can't see that part.
Yeah. I think we can get out of this now.
I think they might have just accidentally been off mute, maybe.
Yeah, that's what I think. Okay. And if you're online, if you want to talk and we are not listening, you just need to speak up loud, okay?
We can raise your hand because I brought the WebEx up on my computer.
Oh, good, okay. Or raise your hand. Oh, hi, Bill. Good. So I will check Bill off. So Bill is also here. Okay, any questions about that? No? All right. Guess that brings us to subcommittee updates. Let me start because I'm going to be quick on the stakeholder input project, which again has been quite a project. We have a report that we have wrapped up. And we have a meeting tomorrow night where we're going to go through the final version of this and get it to the point where the intent is to send it out to you all this week. Now this, as you will learn when Pat and Mel talk, the timing couldn't be better because this will help inform some of the discussion that we are going to have about the executive administration, all that sort of stuff. And so, you know, it's when you get it, you know, read through it. There's a lot of stuff here. It's like 19 pages at the moment, and that is a very consolidated amount of information. I think I mentioned before, it's almost 1,000 lines of Excel that went into this that has now been boiled down to this analysis, et cetera. So the team, which is Steve, Corey, Jack, and I have put in a lot of time on it. And I think it's very candid. People are saying things and we're putting it down the way that it's meant. So it has not been sugar coated at all. So some people are not going to like what they read. But it's what people think. So whether it's something people like or not, you know, so be it. But it is what people think. And I think we just need to know what people, at least its stakeholders, feel about things. So anyhow, this is almost done and you will be getting it emailed to you. It is a Word document. It's not a Google Doc. And some people on the conversion, the formatting goes wonko, you know, so be careful of that.
Suggestion that scan it and send it as a scanned document.
Or just save it as a PDF.
If you scan it, then everyone gets it. And it doesn't have to go through.
Okay.
If anyone has questions, I can tell you later how to get Open Office, which is the free version.
Okay.
So if you're good at that, maybe you can fix my computer.
Yep, my fingers are very reading.
Just save it as a PDF. You could do like file print, save it as a PDF.
Okay. I will do that and save as a PDF. All right. So that's that. I'm going to now pass it to Jess and
Is it all right if I share?
Yeah.
I was
Yep.
sort of had it in
Great.
So thank you. Patrick, can you share the card? So we have a postcard. This is an initial mailer that we hope to send to raise awareness about the Government Review Committee, what we are, what we do. Here it is on your screen. This is side 1. And then side 2, of course, that's an eye chart if you try to read it right now, but we can send it to you, or Patrick can do that in bigger. So our goal today is to share this with you and hopefully have an approval or suggested amendments and an approval pending those so that we can work with town administration to send this sometime this month. That was the goal initially, was to send this initial outreach in January. So I'll pause there so that folks can look at it.
Every household is that.
So it's
They're not only being in English?
a good question. The plan is only,
Because, I mean, printed, it's a little bit harder to decide what language you send it. I mean, we can't send like 3 versions to, versus digitally for like a survey, it's much easier to have variations of language.
good. It's probably a 4x6.
How much is this costing?
Oh, it'll probably be around 4,500. I imagine with printing and ship. I'm not 100% sure. And that's one of the things that we want to confirm about.
Yeah, postage will probably be around 2,500. Yeah, goes into that. I just got a $2,500 from the sort of nonprofit every door direct mail. Price.
Yeah. And so the question 1 is, does the committee approve this postcard? Question 2 is, how do we get this sent in January? So we'll start with question 1.
And again, the point of this is just awareness.
Yeah.
Okay, and it goes to 12,000 households or something?
10,400. 388. My last count.
And so the town is picking up the tab.
That's the next question.
You have the money?
Also the next question.
I was good Nick was here to help us with that.
So there may be a little bit of money. We have to look at the outstanding costs of the committee. So there was an appropriation at town meeting for this, and then there's costs related to the work the Collins Center is providing us. And there was a budget for some other meeting expenses that we may fit into this, but we have to look at what the overall costs are going to be moving forward. But
Very political,
in the
non-committal
grand scheme,
answer.
that was a semicolon. In the grand scheme of things, right, it's not a huge cost related to the committee's work. So we're going to work to figure that out. But we'll probably be back for the committee if we have any questions. So I think that it's probably something that's doable.
Can we expect to ask that question in 2 weeks or 3 weeks when we meet again to see if we can sure it forward?
Yeah, because we're gonna want to announce this all town meeting and it might update. So if we're gonna do it, I want to know before. town meeting.
Is our next meeting on the 27th?
Yeah, the day after town meeting, so I'm gonna need
So
to.
you'll have an answer.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Verna.
What is the expectation of this?
So, I mean, the goal is just awareness and then we're driving people to the website. So there's, if you
Give us something other than QR code.
if you scroll up to the
That.
front, the first, right at the bottom there, learn more online, and then it gives you the URL.
Color, not black and white. That cost more. Obviously.
So maybe we get quotes on black and white versus color,
Yeah, I mean, it'll
or two
be
color printing versus.
25% of the cost to do black and white, which is fine. And also maybe a decision that the town makes that they want to do it in full color because it looks more official that way. Yeah, so, but I've done single color mailers that are just in a colored piece of paper in black text that looked great. So I think it can be done. And I can bring an example for.
I mean, my strong opinion is we push for the full color, the 4 colors, simply because, I mean, this isn't just a fun little side project. This is a committee reimagining town government. And something that we've all collectively put a ton of hours and time and energy into. I think it would be really important, the first mailer that goes out to set that tone of the work we're doing. I think to send it in black and white would be a disservice to how much in the impact that this committee is doing.
This is something the professional.
More efficient.
Well, it looks more, this definitely, come on, this definitely looks more professional.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. And can I go back to the next page? I just want to look like you're driving them to, is Facebook, social media, what?
That's the website.
There's
That link
two,
goes to the website.
there's two things. This one goes to the website, but if you scroll down to the bottom of the second page, there is the Facebook, the town Facebook page. And you don't need to look at any of those. This is the design. But if folks say we only want to drive people to one place and we remove the Facebook page, I think that's a decision that the committee can make. Because again, it can be confusing if we're driving people to two different places. If we have a goal of visits to the government review committee website and we put a different website on there, then that can kind of muddy the waters for that. So,
I guess I would vote for focus as our friend, something like this. And plus, isn't that part of the strategy, more strategy anyhow? Excuse me, it's our strategy.
she has, I think, dual strategies, right? She wants to get people to the town Facebook page as well, but that can't compete with what our goal is with this mailer, in my opinion.
Facebook really some control.
If you, yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, by using Facebook, but also, I'm not sure if the website does this already, but we can certainly say the town has a Facebook page.
I don't think it does, right?
Yeah, that's good. Good feedback.
Yeah.
Connect with us on Facebook.
Right.
You know.
So what do you need from us?
An approval of this pending that one change, I think would be what a motion that I would be happy with.
Can you state the change out loud again, just to be clear?
So the change would be to change the last sentence as far as you can also follow the town's official social media for updates and just say, for more information, visit our website.
Yeah.
We'll workshop that language, but remove the reference to the Facebook page.
It is inside of the Facebook website. Right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Is there-
Just one suggestion. I know that this committee also intends to do one or more public forums. I'm wondering if in the time it takes, to approve it, get it finalized, if you're interested in, getting a date on the calendar, a month or two out, for one public forum so that you can include that in this mailing, or at least,
Announce the fact.
announce the fact that there will be a public forum to look for it. But if you are able to put a date on there, that might be helpful. But just make sure that, I'm just thinking, since you're sending a postcard and everyone's going to get it, that would be something to drive them to.
I think the problem is we would need that date.
If we want to send this card in January, it would be.
Could
Except
you
you
say
can
it?
announce that there will be information about an upcoming public forum on the website.
Yep.
Right, I think no date, because I don't think we're going to be close to ready to get a date, but say that there will be public forum. We also might want to also say that there's going to be a survey, because that survey is going to go out to all the households of which this postcard is going to go. So it's like a pre-announcement of the survey.
Can you scroll down to how you can get involved section? Yeah, so it says on there, public surveys.
Sorry.
I know the mouse is super finicky. So we have here, scan the QR code for meeting information, public surveys, and what we've accomplished so far. You can also follow the town official social media for updates. We could just, and since we're getting rid of the Facebook link, that gives us room to add another sentence around, be on the lookout for a public forum coming in the near future.
Yeah, we can massage that language.
Yeah, I think that public surveys just, okay.
But they can sign up.
We'll let you tweak the language, but I think we get the point. Those are specific things that I think give this more oomph in terms of the purpose of it. And for the skeptics will help justify the cost of
And I mean, just to go back to the comms plan that we sort of the draft that we are working with, we have potentially another one or two direct mail campaigns. One for the survey, which would be covered by the survey cost. But then another one far down to sort of inform people, like, we have answers and here's what they might be. Here's what you can find.
So is that in that plan? So obviously the money for the big survey is accounted for in the warrant. You're going to talk and figure out what money would be available for this mailer, maybe at the same time, and make sure that we plan okay, money for future.
Yeah, planning, the survey mailer is a part of the
Yep,
warrant.
yep.
Yeah, the third one.
Yes, talking about number 3, which would be, as we said, is for communicating that we've done this, there's going to be an election, et cetera.
So do we have a motion to approve the card pending language updates?
So move with the changes I keep saying.
I second. Okay, I guess I have to do your call, don't I? Sorry, I forgot. I can't do this with my.
Well, okay.
Okay, hold on. Yeah, notice the people.
So just to clarify, to accept the card and to mail it to all residents of Burlington.
One pending approval of the all household.
Okay.
All right, Bill, fire. You're muted.
Yes.
Corey Everett,
He's muted too.
Nope. I think his mic isn't working.
Corey, I don't think.
Can you give a thumbs up, Corey? There we go.
Okay, great. Betsy Hughes, yes. Nikki,
Yes.
Jack Kelly,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Russell,
Yes.
Myrna. No. Jess?
Yep.
Matt,
Yes.
Eileen? Yes. Just so that I'm understand, what is the,
It's a lot of money we're spending to do a PR. What is our end date?
it's, September. It's not a year.
Is it end, the end date? Or
Well,
like the whole shebang?
January, yeah. But we have to be done by September in order to get there. So, okay, so it's the cost,
And the timing.
okay.
It's a good PR for us, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think we have much else to share out from our subcommittee.
Can you, send the link to the website to the committee?
The link to the website.
Yes.
I think everybody should look at the website. If you haven't had a chance to look at it, I think you should.
And it's also, if you go to burlington.gov under your government, it's listed under boards and commissions. The only other update is that, Nikki, you've also been working on the first Facebook post, which Laura will put on our communications director will put on the Town of Burlington Facebook page once we work through that.
Okay, it's like 95% of the way there, and it's got voiceover, it's got captions, and it's got all the, we took the original post and divided it into 3 separate posts because there became so much information with the feedback that we got that it just made more sense to do them in smaller bite-sized chunks.
Okay. I'd like to see the wording on those, and I talked to Jess today. I need from you 3, however it happens, I need something for town meeting, a slide, something that will provide information about what we've done in terms of external communications for the update portion of my update to town meeting.
I would essentially include developing the website, developing the Facebook page, and beginning initial outreach. Yeah,
Right. Developing, having it live.
Yeah.
All those things. Yeah, that's great. If I could get you guys to do that part, I'll do the rest of it. That would be helpful.
Did we successfully address Nikki's second item, which was to make sure that there was funding for the card? Is there more that we need to do?
It sounds like Patrick is going to regroup on that.
We said we'll have an answer before.
Good. Great. We'll know whether it goes on tonight or not.
Thank you, Patrick.
Okay, thank you very much. All righty. We do. Actually, that was pretty good. 30 minutes, a little over 30 minutes.
The keyboard so you can use, but it seems to be working now.
And when you're, for those of you on the phone, if you have any trouble hearing, could you please just speak up? Because you know we do have our sound challenges here, so I want to make sure everybody hears all of this, because this is really, we're getting into the beef now.
Today, we're going to be talking about some of the essential functions of government and starting to giving you a framework for discussing the responsibility of various boards, committees, town administrator. Charters typically will define these elements of local government as executive functions. We're still in that executive function article, which is Article 3. Overall supervision, appointing authority, budget preparation, personnel management, contracting and procurement, town properties and facilities. We're going to walk you through what these functions are, how Burlington is doing currently, and some options that you may have for making changes or making it status quo. The intent is not to make decisions on this today. We anticipate that the next meeting's focus, at that time, we'll have a list of questions for you to kind of go through and follow up and have some deliberation on what your thoughts are on who should be performing these functions, whether they're working, whether it's status quo or some changes. But today, we're happy to stop turning to questions. There probably won't be a lot of deliberation, but we want to get through these materials and options.
Just go back.
Yeah.
This. Pardon me. The reason I wasn't at your last meeting in person, I had this thing that everybody else seems to have in the world, but I'm over it, I can assure you, but my voice is still a little recovering. But again, my name is Mel Kleckner. I had an opportunity to participate by video at the last meeting, but just to remind you, I'm an associate along with Pat at the Collins Center. And but my career has been in town management. I was a town manager or town administrator for over 40 years, all in Massachusetts, for the most part in Eastern Massachusetts. And I have a pretty good handle, obviously, on how local government works for towns in Massachusetts. All my work has been in town government, including town manager of Winchester for several years. So I really know the area. I know Burlington. And so I think I'll be good to try to bring you through this group of functions. Now, these functions exist. And the question really is how these functions are going to be handled in the interests of the town. Now, you know that town government and government in general is organized to diffuse central authority. It's intended to create checks and balances. And that's because of the mission of government. The government is owned by the people. The people need to be involved in that government. And one way of doing that is organizational. And so what you find in local government in Massachusetts for towns is that the select board, who is by law the executive body of the town, tends to share that authority with a professional administrator, a professional manager, if you will. Regardless of what you call that, and we'll talk a little bit about the titles in a bit, that power is shared between the executive, between the select board and the professional administrator. And then you have another layer of authority sharing or diffusion, which is with your independently elected boards and committees. And so the select board and the town administrator, but we'll call it that right now, because that's the term you use in your town, now have to share that other executive and administrative authority with these other elected bodies. And I think that's really the challenge of these committees and the communities that we work with is how far do you go to move away from this diffusion, this decentralization, and create a little bit more authority, central authority to deal with the complexity that we're finding in local government these days. And that's really an art more than a science, and it's really how you, as how you see your community. Frankly, some of it is how far you think you can go and make changes, because of course you need your town meeting to approve these select board in the town meeting. So it's interesting. You know, I've worked in a lot of communities like Burlington where there's not a lot of diffuse authority, but it works, and it works for a lot of good reasons. Part of it is new people. You know, the community relies on people like yourself who have expertise in certain areas and who are willing to volunteer their time and expertise and energy to the town. And that happens in a lot of the areas in eastern Massachusetts where there's a lot of professional folks who live in the communities. That makes it work a lot of times. It might not work the best, but it works. And so a lot of times you'll hear folks say, well, if it works, you know, let's not fix it if it works, so to speak. So, but I think, you know, you're looking at it in a different perspective, and we're trying to bring you through some of these executive functions where you can begin to sort of ask questions and consider the range of this authority that you may want to do. There are also a lot of institutional things that happen in a community that tend to bring things together. So, for example, many employees, regardless of what department they work for, they work in a union, and union agreement sort of creates some uniformity in terms of compensation and working conditions. We have procurement laws, which require everybody to do it the right way. Hopefully, you have personnel bylaws or rules. And so those things help. Those things are helping the town work together. But a lot of folks don't think it's enough, and that's why they're looking at their organization a little bit more clearly. And I can tell you, as a town manager or town administrator, there are a lot of things that happen in the community that require some centralized authority and management. I think of things that happened in my career, an employee stealing things, a cyber crime, a number of things that could risk the town's legal or financial resources. And so when those things happen, it's very difficult for you to rely on some elected board or volunteer board, try to marshal the resources and deal with these things that need to be dealt with really quickly and effectively. And so what we're trying to get you to think about, and we're looking at all these other comparative communities, is that spectrum of where you create the checks and balances, how much you give a central administrative authority to get some of these things done. I did want to talk a little bit about this age-old question of town manager versus town administrator. I think that's a question I've been asked more than anything in my career and in my capacity for the town center. Traditionally there was only a city manager or a town manager. That's how it was created originally when communities decided to vest some authority in a professional, experienced administrator. But over time, as smaller communities who maybe didn't have charters, they used this title of town administrator. But today, I can tell you that there is legally no distinction. It really depends on what you want to call it and what duties and responsibilities you want to assign to it. There is no manual. There's no law. There's nothing you can check box and say town administrator X, town manager. I've seen very strong administrators called town administrators. I've seen very weak positions called town manager. So I think you just got to set that aside a bit a lot of communities just do it because what they feel like they might be making a lot of changes and they might say, well, you know, if we call it a town manager, people might think we're doing more than what we really are. And they want to keep the town administrator. Others say, we really want to convey that our town manager or our administrator has authority. And so there's a lot of reasons why you would use those different titles. Generally and historically, however, the stronger the position is, it tends to be called a town manager as administrator. But I want to assure you legally, there's no basis to have one or the other. It's totally your discretion.
May I ask you a question? When recruiting, does it make a difference?
You know, I obviously looked at a lot of jobs. I've had positions called town manager and town administrators. But people like us, we just go right to the charter or right to the documentation and
Job
figure it out.
description.
And figure out what is this. And but I would say no, it doesn't really have that much of an impact going on. I think with that, I think we're going to get into the presentation. We're going to start with overall supervision. Pat?
The first theme that we're going to be discussing is overall, as you mentioned, supervision of the functions and services of the town. Who has daily oversight over these functions? Where does the buck stop during a crisis or other emergency? Who is the go-to person to handle these things? Currently, the town administrator has formal oversight of all departments and functions under the select board's control. For departments under control of other elected boards and officials like the clerk, the town administrator has traditionally had informal oversight and works with these boards to respond and achieve results. It's not, you know, as we saw when we talked to your town administrator, that it's an arrangement based on relationships and professionalism and respecting each other and working together. So we're going to talk a little bit about formalization of this role and what other towns are doing with respect to the overall supervision of functions and services.
I also think it's important we distinguish oversight versus authority. Like how I would define oversight and be like, I oversee certain things, but like I have to do 8 other things to actually get something done as it relates to that. So I also think I want to make sure in some of these we're also like informal oversight. What does that mean? Does that mean he doesn't have any, or the current TA doesn't have any authority? So I think things like that, I just think I want to be very particular with oversight versus actual authority and decision making.
So I think the options here are, options are going to be very similar across all of these functions. You really have the options to just leave things alone. You have a series of, you have a town administrator act. You have bylaws, you have policies, and together they might create an understanding of how it works. For somebody like us or somebody from the outside, it's hard to figure that out, frankly. And so at a minimum, we think a charter process ought to be to try to formalize some of these procedures. Now, then you can go a step further and then change the organization so that you're compelling certain outcomes, hopefully. So those are really the range of options you have. And in each of the categories we talked about, that they're going to be similar. Do you just keep what you have and let's not upset the apple cart? Everybody knows how it works and it's working well. It's working okay and working well, but let's formalize it so everybody understands it. And then to the next level is, no, it's not working well. It could be working better, I should say, and we're going to change some things. And that's really the options I think that you're faced with.
I noticed in reading through the thing you put together that there are, this is kind of somewhere in between 2 and 3 here, that whereas the TA has oversight, I guess, but like on personnel issues, for example, hiring, firing, all that kind of stuff. Some of them say they have the responsibility to do it, but they need the approval of the board, for example. So is there a hybrid option in there?
There
That,
are unlimited hybrid
Okay.
options. It's really, I will say, we looked at many charters.
Yeah.
There's not one, two that are exactly, alike, unless you're looking at city forms of charters. But local town government charters, it is a hybrid by its nature.
so that is a direction that some people go in, obviously.
Yes, you can do it anywhere in between.
Is there anything you can state generally around the mechanisms by which, power is often diffused or the checks and balances are achieved, even if, let's say a non-select board organization had some more formal, oversight, the word we're picking on at the moment, but maybe that's not the word being used. What are the typical functions that are the mechanisms that are used to sort of give that balance of both a little bit of separation and also a little bit of integration?
Sure. We're going to look at
Okay,
a lot of them, but personnel and appointments are a big part. I think everybody knows that if you have the ability to appoint and be responsible for that person's employment, then there tends to be more control. And so that's one area that we're going to talk about and put in checks and balances so that there's not too much authority, especially in those areas. So why don't we go to the next slide, which talks about some of the issues in this particular area, and they'll overlap, but let's talk about them a little bit. Currently, I believe in Burlington, the town administrator does not have direct control of all those independently elected boards, those agencies. They also do not appoint the town accountant and town council. Those are exempted from the town administrators, not control, so to speak, but their appointment. And sometimes that follows. The appointments sort of follow the ability to effectively supervise and manage. So we've got to figure out which ones are going to be exempted, and for those, then what areas, or what checks and balances will be in place if you choose to give the town manager greater authority. One of the checks and balances is just the ability to approve or to have input into the appointment. So let's talk, for example, about a department, maybe a planning board. The planning board obviously has great policy authority. We're an elected board here. But if the town administrator is going to be appointing the chief planning officer, to what extent does the board continue to have input and ability to control that department in particular? So really, that's what it is who's making the appointments and what checks and balances, if you want to say, or approvals are required for that administrator to achieve that supervision. So I think, Jess, your point about the words is very important. And so I think as you get into some of the other elements, you'll find what supervision really is. It's not just something, it's really effectively managing resources, personnel, the budget, perhaps, and other things. It's not just saying I'm in charge, but not having any of the levers to be.
When we see the word appointment, does this imply that the power of unappointment is also present, or is that deliberately vague?
Good question. We are going to get into that.
Oh man,
An appointment is equivalent to hiring,
Yes.
just for people
Yeah.
who are not.
I think with a department head, the word appointment is I think a little bit more appropriate. If you're hiring a custodial position, I think we're essentially talking about hiring people, but appointment, usually there is either a term or there's high level responsibility. So appointment in this case, I think we're really talking about. And I think that's actually our next,
Contracts get involved sometimes.
for department heads, they're never, members of unions.
But they may have
Employment contracts.
There are some officials that are allowed to have employment contracts. Many of them are at
police chief.
police chiefs and fire chief or two come to mind.
So, the grid that was sent out, since, in Reading, there's a lot of appointments, assessors, planning board, board of health. So these folks get paid. And so appointments, so does that immediately say, oh, they're going to get some compensation?
Well,
Stipend or otherwise?
well, we appoint other people without compensation. I think the town appoints you all. And you're not being paid.
Okay, so appointment doesn't necessarily.
Not necessarily, you're right. You're right. They are
If we're
employees.
talking about a planning director or something like that, those are full-time employees. I think that's where the confusion is.
So I think we'll get into this a little bit more as we talk about appointment of personnel. And we'll be maybe in the next section.
And we're dividing it between appointment of staff versus appointment of employees.
Oh, I did want to say one other thing. When we talk about independently elected boards and committees, we're generally not talking about the school committee. Massachusetts law really does segregate the elected school committee and limits the amount of intrusion from administrative, from town side. There are a lot of levers that are used and a lot of measures that are used to help bridge that and cooperate. A lot of it's around the budget. But I did want to mention that, we're not going to keep saying, but not the school committee. Just assume the school committee are really not applicable that much, at least in this part of the discussion so far.
Next, we're going to talk about who has appointing authority for staff members. And in general, we're talking about department heads as far as what's happening in Burlington currently, but employees are also a part of this. Currently, the town administrator appoints department heads under select board control, with the select board having veto power within a certain number of days it can disapprove of the department head appointments. Elected boards appoint department heads under their control. With respect to employees, the town administrator appoints the employees under the select board control directly that are not necessarily department heads, although there are occasions when the select board may be involved, for example, on civil service appointments, they may consider the appointing authority in that manner. Department heads may recommend or be involved in the appointment of employees in departments under elected board control. All of these employees, the staff who are not department heads and department heads, are subject to HR hiring processes. So, and the HR department is under the select board and town administrator's control. So there's a little bit of a check and balance with that respect. But currently, as far as department heads under the four elected boards, the town administrator does not have appointment or removal authority over them. However, they may get involved with respect to the human resources position, and you also have bargaining agreements involved, etc.
So
At a point within the steps and the chart, they can't go outside of that.
right, and we're talking appointment, we're also talking unappointment, right? So is that going to be a separate discussion or is that here?
There is, the next slide talks, just really raised that as an issue. Often the same procedure for appointment follows with dismissal.
Right.
And that's one of the things you'll have to decide. Is there anything more you want to do, or do you want to take away the dismissal as opposed to the appointment? But generally speaking, the same process that's used for appointment is used. So, for example, when a town administrator hires a department head and the select board has the ability to veto, I think they would have that same authority if the town administrator wants to dismiss a department head.
Right. But if it's a board, there's no check on, like, to make sure I understand this correctly, that as a, if you're an employee under the select board, the administrator hires you, the select board has to approve you, the administrator fires you, and the select board has to approve you. Under, if it's a elected board, then the elected board hires you, but nobody is checking on that, right? There's no secondary approval required.
Other than HR processes, but again, if you're an independently elected board, I'd like to see the HR processes. I mean, they're not in the special act, and I don't, they assume they're in the bylaws, but it depends. I guess it depends on the details. But generally speaking, you're right that the independently elected boards are just that. They control the employment of resources, the personal resources.
And we do many independent studies of HR departments and how they manage across many boards. And it can be difficult. It can be difficult to have a consistent HR policy across all boards. And we'll talk about perhaps some ways to make sure that all departments are subject to these HR policies. It can be difficult. You also have appointed and elected boards who may not have the HR expertise to understand all the nuances of collective bargaining agreement or the requirements of federal, state, and local law. So there needs to be a great deal of collaboration with the HR department with respect to the boards that are doing the hiring, especially of the departments.
There's another just a factor. There's an open meeting law in local government, and so any multi-member boards have to meet in public. Now, there are ways to go into executive session on personnel matters, but it's tricky, very tricky. And so oftentimes, having an administrator involved sort of takes it out of that big public arena. I mean, who really wants to do their job interview, on TV and be exposed to, somebody writing down all of your answers and publishing them in the paper the next day? It can be very daunting, and it might even impede your ability to attract good people. So often that is another way that sometimes elected boards, it's very awkward, especially in the dismissal part, but also in the appointment, to sort of get it a little bit out of the public arena until decisions are sort of made. And then, of course, everybody knows.
Especially if somebody's interviewing, their employer doesn't know they're coming there for an interview.
That would be a problem.
That would be a problem.
So let's move on to appointment. So again, the options here, you have what we would refer to as a hybrid appointment process, and you can retain that. You can begin to give the town administrator more authority, appointed by select board, and you're pretty much there, except for the town accountant and the town council, I believe, or the authority to appoint department heads that are appointed by elected. And then, of course, the question is, how do you do that? If the authority is vested in the town administrator, what's the process? Is it a confirmation process where the board has to actually vote, or do they just can veto if they want to? And sometimes, if you don't take any action within a certain period of time, it becomes these appointments or dismissals become just effective by the expiration of that time period. And this is especially important with the other elected boards. They're elected for a reason. They want to be in charge of the agency that they're involved in. And so it's a very tricky process to determine, what the town administrator's role is, and that. So you'll see in the wording in the comparative committee, some say, consult. Some say you need their approval. And some say, nope, can't do it. It's just not allowed. Those are independent. And so that's sort of the range you have to do that. I had the question about saying the authority for appointment, does it apply to termination? Generally speaking, but you need to be explicit about that. And then, as Pat said, how do you ensure that your hiring is based on merit and you're going to avoid litigation risk? And there's a lot of litigation in employment matters these days, civil rights litigation as well. And so you really need to be sure that if the town administrator is not involved, that there is something backing you up to back the town up. And I think it's usually a personnel system, usually adopted by the town meeting or by the select board. But the charter would be clear that everybody is required, regardless of your elected status, to comply with the personnel system. And that's one way that a lot of times it's
What does personnel system mean in your world?
how people get paid, how do they are they evaluated?
Policies and procedures, is
A
that
lot of policies and procedures, but a lot of, yeah. So you're the expert in personnel systems.
Exactly, it includes all of these things. Personnel, how are personnel policies passed? And which we'll talk a little bit about. And when we get a little further. So it includes personnel policies, it includes who's the decision maker, it includes the formal grievance process for unions. It may include who do you go to for a request for an accommodation. So it's the entire, it's really been a broadened term. Some call it human resources, others call it personnel. But it's a broader term. Human resources tends to be more current.
absolutely?
You don't want, for example, one department saying, okay, on Saturdays, you're going to get time and a half. Another department says, you're going to get double time, and or whatever. You really just have to have consistency across the board, not only to run, a good organization and have employees be well, feeling good about themselves and feeling that town's treating them fairly, but also to avoid risk and litigation, some of these other bad things.
So, but at this point, we're just talking about the appointing authority of staff. So one of the things that we're going to have you walk through and do is talk a little bit about, do you want to have the appointing authority for the staff department head, the department heads go through the same process through the town administrator and perhaps with the approval of the select board, or in order to engage the entire human resources operations, or are you interested in taking a look at whether the independent boards, whether they should continue to have that department head appointment alone, or if they should share that authority with the town administrator or town?
Is there any scenario where the select board, this is where I think there should be a bit of a rub. If I can see where the HR stuff, if a elected board has the ability to hire or manage their policies, whatever it is, where we wouldn't necessarily want the select board to have any authority over that at all. But because the HR person, who we do want to have that be a collaboration, reports to the select board, that is there a way that you can uncouple that so that it's like more matrix, so that the HR policies and systems would kind of dotted line report to that, so that you don't have to go to the select board for approval? And you see what I mean? Like, you're going to hire somebody, and if we keep it that the elected board can hire somebody, but they should be using the HR systems.
Yeah, you can decouple those, but yeah.
And so that the select board doesn't have authority over the HR hiring process, because I think that's going to be a bit of a rub.
Well, can we clarify that, like, just because the TA or TM has authority doesn't mean the select board has authority?
Right.
Direct.
Yeah, that to me is like, I just because the TA reports to the select board doesn't mean the select board actually has the authority to vote on everything. Or is that not the case? I mean, I'm
You
grappling.
can do it any way you want, but usually, let's say, we'll take the planning board again. The planning board, the administrator hiring a planning director. You don't have to involve the select board necessarily. You can do it with the planning board or that independent elected board. You can limit the engagement between the administrator and that board, and you don't have to engage the select board.
But you could have the administrator and the elected board working together and the select board's out of it. Because that's kind of what
You
I'm
could do
asking.
that. You could do that.
Okay.
I've seen others that still require the select board approval, even though it's not within their jurisdiction, and that probably.
That would be a,
In that case, it's an up or down approval, right? So you're having the town administrator work with the planning board, perhaps on candidates that are acceptable to both of them, and presenting that candidates for an up or down approval, which is very different
from whom?
from the select board. Sometimes that's how it's worked.
Yeah, I'm wondering if we can decouple that.
You could. As I said, there is really your discretion is to really do whatever you feel is best. And there's ways there's a version out there somewhere that we could help with.
So like the independent board has to follow the HR program to do it. But they don't need the select board's permission as long as they follow the HR program.
Well, at a minimum, we want them to follow that. And then there's the further question.
But we have to
Is
put
there
their money.
is there anybody else involved?
Yeah, that has
The
been
town
talked
administrator.
about.
So you can have it just say, independent authorities hire their own people, yet they must follow the established personnel policy. You can do that. Or you can say they have to do that, plus they need to get, they need to engage with the town administrator. Any range of those things you can do. And I think when you look across with comparators, in many cases, they do have that range of language.
Yeah.
You can take from some and work everything pretty.
Next, we want to talk a little bit about the appointment authority for boards and committees. Currently, certain boards, we have this chart, this comparison chart that we gave you. Certain boards are elected, while others are appointed by the select board with recruitment assistance by the town administrator. I think we talked before that your bylaws are a little unclear because the title to your bylaws say town administrator appointments, but inside the bylaw, it says, for example, the select board appoints the conservation commission. In practice, what happens is the town administrator recruits for these appointed board positions and gives all of the names to the select board. And the select board makes the choice. The town administrator doesn't recommend. In some communities, it runs the gamut from the select board wouldn't be involved at all and the town administrator would make all the appointments, to the town administrator would, similar as to what's done with department heads, would come up with what the town administrator thinks is the best candidate and the select board is a thumbs up or thumbs down. But right now what you have is the town administrators involved in recruitment, but just simply gives the names to the select board. The select board chooses who is on.
In practice,
That's happening
the
here?
case, yeah.
That's my understanding.
So can you say that again?
That's okay.
Boards and committees.
Boards and committees, appointed boards and committees.
Yeah.
So my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is the administrator recruits and collects and makes sure that they're minimally qualified or, for this and interested, and then passes all those names on to the select board. Does the town administrator get involved in making recommendations among the people that have applied?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, that's what's happening.
But they don't choose one name to put forward. They're giving the selection to choose from.
So I think in many cases, it depends, right? So there are some boards and committees under the management and control of the town administrator or the select board that we ask the committees to say, there's some interest, here are the names we've generated, please interview them and provide a recommendation to the town administrator who will then make that recommendation of appointment to the select board. That depends on the body of work of the committee. So that's happening this week. There's a board and committee with a vacancy that we've asked the board to interview, and the select board member is participating in that. In some cases, the town administrator we'll solicit that input, or solicit the candidates and make that one recommendation to the select board. That's most often the case. I mean, I think that
Can't
there's,
see them, anything wrong with those people.
no, and there's collaboration, because you're right, there is this lack of distinction of what it means to be appointed by the town administrator, what it means to be appointed by the select board. But ultimately, all of those appointments are going for the select board for that sort of approval. So, you know, I think that it works efficiently right now, but we also say, hey, in some cases, there's 3 people interested in 1 seat, and we want to develop some sort of interview process, whether that be informal or formal. So,
It also sounds like we could stand some clarification about which is which and what process applies to which board.
yeah, and I think generally the way it works well, you know, you're bringing, whether you're a town administrator or whatever, you're bringing a committee member, you're bringing a candidate before the board, and there's understanding and acceptance that, hey, this person's volunteering their time and they've been vetted and recruited, or they've provided interest in this committee, and town administrator or staff support that. In some cases, you bring the select board member in on those discussions to meet somebody and say, hey, we're going to be appointing this person, or what do you think of this person as a meet and greet, so that there's that connection. But yeah, how it works here is mostly bringing those names forward.
Where it doesn't work well are the boards or committees not reporting to themselves. My introduction to planning board, I was appointed to planning board due to a vacancy, and it was a disaster of a process, because there wasn't a process. It was messy. There was a lot of arguing. It was just, and as a candidate, it was a huge turnoff for somebody who was new to town government. And so I think there's also things we need to think about with, and obviously it's going to depend also on how the structure shakes out, but what does that process look like for those committees reporting into select board or boards and those not? Because there's definitely a power there.
It sounds like what you're talking about is someone being appointed to a vacancy to an elected position.
Yes.
Yeah.
And under when we go into the boards and committees, we will talk about what exactly happens if there's a vacancy, who's involved, who the decision maker is. Now, it's not going to be, it sounds to me like you may need some sort of, we also will have a section that talks about stational, et cetera. You may need not necessarily in the charter, but either by bylaw or policy, something that kind of goes through what is the process for recruitment for these positions? How do we make sure that enough people, and I can tell you, we do a whole year and a half studies just on that question. So I don't think you're going to solve that today.
Yeah.
That's already defined. It says it's a joint between the select board and the planning board. The planning board would be 6 instead of 7.
Right.
Select board's 5, so the planning board's unified. They get it.
Yeah, most of
And that's the information that goes in the charter, is that basic information, but how you recruit and bring people aboard, and if you have any sort of plan for these people jumping off, maybe something that's more part of a policy decision, where you may need some sort of
Consistent across boards too, because there's definitely been arguing about that with different boards.
So if I could just give a small operational update to that. We're developing a uniform process for applying for boards and committees on our website, which is just but we're working on it, and that same conversation came up as, well, we're missing a whole bunch of committees here. So, I'm going to talk to the moderator at some point and show, how, or sort of tagging that on there, that, just because there may be different appointing authorities, it shouldn't stop us from collecting information from people that may be interested in something, so that when a vacancy does occur, you have a pool of people that you can reach out to, the sort of a prescribed place to go to submit that interest. Because right now, there's a lack of that description of how you apply or where you go to. And so, in my experience, having that, as that comes up, hey, there's a vacancy on this board, go apply here, and you can have, all of that information there. So just as an update to the group that it's something we built out and we're sort of, ready to go. We just have some of those underlying questions about the different authorities. So it's something we think about a lot from operation.
So from a charter perspective, which would Jess's problem be?
No, that one probably, as pointed out, is by statute. It's an elected board. When there is a vacancy, there's a very prescriptive process. Unfortunately, it was pretty contentious, or, I can't tell you how many times I've been to meetings where volunteers come in thinking, they're doing a great service for the town. By the time the interview's over, they're walking away saying, why did I ever put myself up for this? Because, people are challenging, my this or that. And so anything you can do to avoid or get it to the point where it's a little easier process when you get public, because these boards are public and I think that's helpful. So the charter
It
can do
wasn't
that.
prescriptive. There were 2 vacancies within 1 year. And both of them are handled very differently.
Really? Well, so the way you appoint that is, as you pointed out, the remaining members of the planning board get together with the select board and they jointly have to appoint. That, there's no question about that. But the process
Right, the process.
that's used can be much different. I think the charter can help.
Yeah, I think that would be, we should make note that we need to make sure we do as much.
All the 11 people.
Well, it could, for example, give the town administrator the ability to vet candidates in advance and maybe provide recommendations. Maybe that's one option.
Many times that you work with personnel boards,
Yes.
and I know this one was mentioned here.
Yeah, personnel boards have tended to be usurped by staff personnel departments, generally speaking. But you still have personnel boards to handle policy level issues and bring recommendations to either the town meeting or the select board. So they're more advisory than actual. In the past, the personnel board used to actually make decisions on compensation and other classification issues, and they tend to be less policy. They're more policy and advisory now.
I think also the whole area of human resources, which is my preferred term, is far more complicated than it used to be. So a lot of times those personnel boards weren't there. You need a professional, just like you need a finance person who knows that stuff. HR is very, very specific. You need a professional there. So I think when you have a board, you don't necessarily have people who are experts in, unemployment law or union negotiation or whatever it is that you have to do that. So,
And I was thinking when the hiring,
Yes.
then you get involved.
but I would think that a town as complex as Burlington, you couldn't have a hiring board do that. You need to have different groups from different bodies because of the expertise that's required for each. Is my guess that you'd have to.
How many, was it 1,000 employees or something?
So I think we've outgrown. I guess my point is, I think the times have changed, and that's probably no longer really a viable way to move forward on that. And I also think the size of our organization is such.
But our HR department is what, all of 2 people?
Right, and they have a great deal of responsibility and authority, but they're professionals in that area.
It's not like a volunteer.
It's not a
I
volunteer.
understand that.
Is there anything you can speak to, either generally or specifics that have been, in our special acts or bylaws or things that speak to like the first principles of why a board is chosen to be an elected board, more specifically how it is vested authority and how that authority is meant to be carried out? For example, we're talking a lot about appointing. a pretty powerful, thing to be able to wield. It makes sense that for whatever reason, when it was inculcated, that board was decided to be an elected board. So the people like that group, and then that group has the power to make some appointments. Do we have anything other than my intuition on that?
To do, and we're going to be talking about that today. You were just like, we have totally planted all of it. So we will be
All right,
talking
good.
about
Turn
that.
around then.
We're going to talk about it in a little while. I don't want you to go too far down the road. With respect to appointed versus elected, it's very important. This is a very important issue, and we will have you go through this rubric and talk about all of your boards and talk about whether it makes sense for them still to be elected, or whether, you have an appetite for change or like how things are working. We have a number of things to look at. The important thing to realize is that whether somebody is appointed or elected, you still have the opportunity to make changes to the board with respect to, who are they appointing? What is their role? Are they advisory? What is their role in the budget process? So these are going to be separate issues.
Yeah, to throw my own, here's what I'm thinking.
Yep.
It sounds like there's a lot of problems with clarity and consistency. So that's one thing I'm looking to adjust personally. And then obviously I'm also interested in trying to retain the intent behind as many as possible, that balance of power, that sharing of power, so that we're not skewing things inadvertently too far one way or another. At the same time, acknowledging things like HR policies and consistency of employment, consistency of how people do their jobs and get recognized for their jobs, those kind of things. I don't know. That's what I'm looking for, to sort of piece it together.
Tricky, but you can do it, and it's been done. And so, it doesn't mean elected boards are bad. It just means that, if you're going to have elected boards, you need to address those areas. And I think you'll find in those imperative matrix, as well as some of the other work we've done. I think about one of our projects where there was specific language that said, an elected board, will never cede their authority to make policy or to set fees if that's their job, whatever. But in terms of administration, they shall be responsible. They shall allow the administrator to be responsible for certain aspects. So it's always how it's written up.
Yep. It's kind of stuff.
Stuff.
There you go.
It's just a delay. Okay, yeah, now I went too far. So we're going to talk about budget preparation. Another way that we need to talk about how the various boards collaborate is in their work on preparing the annual budget. We're going to talk about what is the budget review and approval process? What should it be? Currently, this is under the act. It doesn't mean necessarily what's happening in real life, but currently the town administrator is charged with preparing the budget for departments controlled by the select board. Under the acts that you have, elected boards prepare their own budgets along with their help from the department heads. And once those are done, the town administrator prepares a uniform budget document for presentation to Ways and Means. So essentially, the town administrator gathers the budgets together and prepares one document to give to Ways and Means. And feel free to jump in if that's not your understanding.
Yeah, that's.
I was just going to add too, there's a lot of Ways and Means involvement during the process too. There's subcommittees related to each department that are reviewing those budgets before they go to the Ways and Means Committee for final approval, and then the whole budget.
Ways and Means says a form they send out to each department. And they have to fill it out and provide certain information going back to Ways and Means.
And
I will say it's more unified, I think, without the sort of governance infrastructure, then that's letting on in that paragraph. We, as the administration, we we meet with all of the departments to talk about. We had a big capital summit. I think for the first time, we all went through all of these things that sort of all share the approach that unified budgeting is, the most important here. So there's also guidelines set, and but to the point is that, there is that infrastructure lacking to sort of be a backstop to ensure that we are following and maintaining all together consistently long-range financial planning, which I know I talked at length at the last meeting about, especially about the importance of sort of putting structure on it. But
So can I summarize to say, like, in practice, it's a very unified process, but it's not necessarily codified,
so
documented.
I would say the idea is for it to be unified as much as possible, right? So this is my first time going through the budget process here, and it's coming from a place where I was the CFO, where it was very heavy management control in the charter. It's not, the process hasn't been too indifferent so far. At least, I haven't run up to it yet. And that doesn't mean that that's not going to happen. It's still very early in that process. It's not too indifferent.
So that's the creation of the budget. Question though about like throughout the year, if there needs to be some redistribution of budget, let's say between boards or committees that are not all under this current structure, is redistribution of funds a possibility?
So not really. I mean, there's controls to make sure that that doesn't happen. But what is possible is at the end of the year, when we look at all of the budgets and where they are, we often go to Ways and Means, say we need to transfer between departments to offset any deficits that may have occurred throughout the year. It's rare in many ways because we do have, from the finance department, we make sure that all of the departments are monitoring their budgets. Departments outside of our control, we are managing their capital project budgeting and things like that. So there isn't that ability to sort of redistribute. I can say we're taking $1 million from the recreation department and bring it over to the select board office. That's not something that could be done. But if there was an emergency or something occurred within one of these, other departments, we definitely work to find resolution to those within town meetings appropriation, but we can't exceed appropriations or anything like that.
This is the state statute that limits the amount or percentage you can move out of one budget into another.
Yeah, it's always at the end of the year.
Yeah.
The practice or the policy is town meeting controls the budget, and no one can independently move money around except there's an end of year process. It's a fairly new process that.
Yeah, that limit that Jeb mentioned is not just anymore. Orientation is you can transfer between departments without this, absent the school department. Between May and July 15th, May 30th and July 15th, or I think close in the first deadline, but up until July 15th, that statute's gone. I believe so. So
It's been replaced with something.
right.
So just on this, in terms of preparing annual budget, is it correct? My understanding was that the town administration would establish like the target budget, like everybody can go up by 3%. I mean, that kind of the parameters for budgeting is established by the town administrator or generally.
Generally, say the financial team, which includes Ways and Means.
Well, no, I'm asking a different question. Okay. I want to know if the town administrator is the one who establishes the target budget, and does the Ways and Means have the authority to establish those target budgets?
Yeah, so it's interesting when you say authority, right? Because that's a different question than it started out to be.
What's the D? If we're drawing a RACI, if we're drawing like a RACI, then who has responsible, accountable, consulted, informed? Who is responsible? Sorry, corporate America. Who has pieces that are, like, they are responsible for making that decision.
No. So philosophically, I think it's incumbent upon the town administrator and his team to develop a financial plan that the town can, that is sustainable and the town can afford.
Right.
It's a balanced budget and has all sorts of other factors involved. But I'm not sure that there is a board or committee that can, by bylaw or special act, say this is what it's going to be. I think that that's where the collaboration comes in. You know, we generally host a meeting, Ways and Means, school committee, and other folks say, here's what we're looking at. Here's our, you know, here are the budget guidelines, if you will, for this year. Here's what factors or threats there are to maintaining it.
But you, meaning the town administrator, is got the responsibility to kind of create that document that the other boards will react to.
Yeah,
Trying to figure out who's.
Yeah, generally
who's got that
speaking, there has to be an organizer and a facilitator and a
Right.
connector of that, and that's town administration.
That's-
You know, because it has to start with somewhere, and you could get those groups together, and they may say wildly different things, but I think that generally it's incumbent on town administration to connect all of those and to facilitate that discussion to say,
It
here's.
starts with the town administrator
I think
and then brought in other people. I think that's kind of an important point.
A budget is typically an executive function,
Yeah.
putting together a budget and adopting it is a legislative function. And the way I see it, the Ways and Means are sort of an extension of that legislative process. But the way it works here, and I'm not saying it's wrong, I've mentioned that the towns figure things out. You're bringing the Ways and Means in early, I think. And that line between legislative and executive is somewhat blurred. And maybe it works fine, and that's fine. I think you just got to document some of it. But when you say who's responsible, I mean, ultimately, it's the town meeting. The town meeting is you cannot appropriate money without the town meeting adopting. the
Yeah,
budgets.
I think I'm talking more like who's responsible for creating,
Yeah.
town meeting reacts to what they're presented, that somebody's got to initiate it.
Well, that's a good point. And I
The
think,
town administrator brings together the assessors, the treasurer, and all these different people.
Right, so
Yeah.
they're responsible for creating.
it sounds to me like your
Town meeting.
Ways and Means has the final sort of recommendation to town meeting. I mean, that's the way the statute is sort of created. So let's say that there's a difference of opinion. The select board thinks, the school committee should get 2.5%, and school committee thinks they should get 3.5%. And who makes that final sort of recommendation? I believe it's the Ways and Means, but I'd have to learn more about how.
Yeah, that's, again, my first budget cycle here, but that's my understanding here is that it goes through Ways and Means, but I think that there's a huge amount of collaboration up until that point. Administration and all those other groups, so it's definitely a huge partnership. You wouldn't expect Ways and Means to develop all of these documents and spreadsheets
Yeah.
that go along with it.
So is that something that in a charter, it would be documented that it's a collaborative effort with the following bodies involved kind of thing?
Well, usually collaboration, if it can't be defined very well, it's hard to put that in a charter.
Okay.
You can talk about a process that requires that collaboration, but it's hard to really define it. But you can do that. And we would recommend that if you are following a process that you like and you want to keep, we've got to figure a way how to explain it
Okay.
in the charter.
And I just wanted to point out, there's two parts of the charter for this budget will be discussed. What we're talking about here is just a part of the executive function. What are the town administrators? There is another article in the charter that will be financial procedures. And that will be, for example, oftentimes, some of the things that are added to it are, at the beginning of the budget process, these people will meet, or there will be a certain number of public input sessions in the budget. So the process of going through the budget will be handled in a different article. But for the purposes of this article, we're interested in knowing what are the, and they're going to be interrelated, but we're interested in knowing what the town administrator role is versus perhaps the role of some of these independent boards.
Christian, why don't you just go to that issues slide, just pass over the options and go right to the issues. So these are some of the questions that we identified. What is the scope of the town administrative authority to prepare the budget? Is it required to that town administrator will prepare a balanced budget? And if not, then how would the budget be reconciled if it was not in balance? And are there other budget preparation requirements, especially capital budgeting and long-term budgeting forecasts? We find those are finding their ways into charters more and more. Who's authorized to review and submit the final budget? I believe that's ways and means. We need to clarify that. And then I think Pat mentioned, upfront, are there any options for required public participation and information in the budget process? Sometimes those are in the charter as well. So a lot there. But the budget, I think, is one of the most single. When we talk about appointment authority, which is very important, also budget authority is very important to compel cooperation and collaboration. Frankly,
Power in the pocket.
yeah, I would first.
And Mel, maybe you could talk a little bit about the range of how you've seen it done and what the town, because it sounds like there's an informal role right now for the town administrator to bring things together. What are some of the options you've seen in the different towns?
Well, I mean, one option is this sort of a collaborative group where you can actually say, you shall convene this group of people. But again, it's kind of hard to legislate what they do with it, who's responsible. But you can at least require that there be a process that engages these groups of people at different times of the process.
And how about holding departments responsible to budget spending?
There often is a provision in a charter that says people have to at least follow the instructions of the town administrator. The town administrator is responsible for preparing budget guidelines, and often the charter says, and all departments must cooperate. That doesn't mean to say that they can't request more or advocate for themselves, but they at least have to follow some of the requirements, and that's something we would recommend we do charter.
So I think, assuming I'm looking at the correct language, which is the current special act for the town administrator, it does explicitly say that the town administrator is responsible for the preparation of the annual budget for all town agencies under the jurisdiction of the Board of Selectmen. So right there, that feels strange to me because you would think it would be for all of the town, because how's that other budget playing with? Obviously, we've figured it out, but I would like to see that codified myself. And then there's also not just the preparation, but it looks like, maybe just preparation. Leave it at that. Leave it at that. Preparation form the uniform budget document, and then, the annual budget for all town agencies. I'm not sure what the difference between those two is, but that's fine. So it sounds like there is a current authority in the town administrator, at least to present a budget for the boards that are under the select board.
Right, and it's, as you've mentioned, it's two parts. Preparing the budget is for those under the select board. However, creating this uniform document is kind of the process that you're talking about that you're going through. Not a lot of guidance around that, but the basic requirement in the act is that they gather all the budgets from the different boards and committees. You worked it out so that there's a more collaborative process along the way, so that there's no surprises at the end. Someone comes in, at 10% higher than they're expected to. We've worked it out along the way.
By the time they get there, they know everybody is on the same page.
Look, if somebody is trying to do something strange to their budget because change of personnel or something, there's a subcommittee of ways and means that would work with that department.
And it starts in June.
So, okay, so we're gonna need to flush that out in our deliberations.
Yeah. Right now, I think we're talking about whose job is it to put the budget together, and I think we all agree that it's probably an executive function, at least to start. And that sounds like what we have in place.
We've talked a little bit about this so far. This is entitled Personnel Management, Human Resources, et cetera. Human resources is kind of the more overall encompassing term it's evolved into. But what we're talking about, what rules are in place to effectively classify, compensate, motivate, evaluate, and discipline employees? I'm not going to spend a lot. We talked about this already, but essentially, the town administrator supervises the HR department. Personnel policies, I believe the town administrator said, are drafted by HR and approved by the select board before they're implemented. Town administrator also represents the town in collective bargaining. But, the HR does report to the town administrator. So even though you have different boards and committees, there are the policies that have been approved by the select board. We'll talk about making it clear whether they apply to all of the boards and committees, not just those under the role of the select board.
Is that difficult when you have different unions?
Generally, whatever is in the union contract is going to prevail over whatever the policy is because you've contracted with that. Most policies say unless otherwise provided in the collective bargaining.
So you can have various.
So there are some, you may have different number of sick days or different seniority provisions in different. But that is, and then usually what happens is there's a de facto what happens in the event you're not. So there's the non-union employees are treated a certain way, and the others may have contracted for different.
Is there any provision for legal? It occurs to me the select board is approving HR policies, that there should be some sort of legal review. In that.
I would hope so. Yeah, I would expect your legal counsel would.
But I would think we'd require it.
It's generally not included in a charter, that language. The select board does have the authority to appoint counsel and usually will in that process. It's difficult to know. I mean, I'm not sure that's something we'd legislate in a charter that it be approved. That's practice would be that the lawyer would approve any new personnel policies. It also kind of depends on the HR department and who's involved in the HR department and what their route is.
Is there in a charter, do you put things about that there needs to be a review of the policies for legal compliance on a period, on a certain time frame, like every year or whatever? The reason I ask is because I know ours are out of date, so I'm concerned. And it seems to me that that would be an area where if it's charter, if it is appropriate to put some sort of thing in to protect the town.
We'll look at some language.
Okay.
That might help.
We will. In general, I can say that when it comes to HR, we err on the side of not putting things in charters because the best practices and the legal requirements evolve so quickly over time, and it's difficult to change a charter. It might be a bylaw issue, it might be a policy issue to require updating in a certain, in a certain thing, but it probably would not rise to the level of a charter issue, simply because we often recommend keeping most, the details of personnel policies out of it. Rather, there might be, often there will be, you need to make it clear how personnel policies are enacted, but the details of review, I can tell you from our experience, I do a lot of HR reviews. Everyone's policies are out of date, right? It is very difficult to make the time. It falls to the bottom of the list when so much is going on. Furthermore, the law may change and a new law may be enacted. Require the director to spend all of their time looking at this brand new law and figuring out how to handle this new family leave regulation. So they tend to update them piecemeal instead of overall. So, exactly as needed. So I think if that kind of provision were in the charter, 90% of the towns in Massachusetts would be in violation of that provision. It's just they tend to do it more piecemeal overall because new laws are coming out all the time. new court cases come out all of the time that change the meaning of the laws where they thought this is what the law meant and the court case reverses it and it means something else. So it's definitely an ongoing process. And in general, in our other charters, we've recommended a lot of these details we left out of the chart because quite simply, it's too difficult to meet those.
Does a human resources department get specified and their mandate explicitly stated in the charter? Or is that something that?
No.
You don't talk about HR at all?
You will talk about, generally HR reports to the administrator. So one of the functions of the administrator is going to be to manage human resources and manage the policies. So their authority is in there as the, as the supervisor of human resources, the ultimate supervisor of human resources. But the content of it generally will fall to the bylaws and to policies. In fact, in many bylaws, we're encouraging towns and cities and towns to take a lot of the specific language out of the personnel bylaw because it's so rapidly changing.
Yeah, I'm not looking for specific language. I just, and I think now you know where I'm going. It's just like I just think that we need to not identify what policy, blah, 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 but it's just that even a blanket statement that it must be compliant with current legal parameters or whatever, because the HR person may be really busy, but if there's a violation of one of those policies, the town's going to be on the hook. So I just feel like the accountability, if it's the town administrator who oversees HR, then that town administrator should feel some responsibility to make sure that the priority set for the HR department is that they are following current policies.
I mean, you could say that about a lot of things, whether it's IT or
Right.
finance. So, it's tricky, but if that's something the committee is interested in, we'll try to work with you on that.
And I've seen many in the laundry list of the job duties of the town administrator and town manager. Often on the list is to ensure compliance with federal, local, state laws and, and it's more general. It's not specific to that, but
That's fine.
will always be on the laundry list.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's the town administrator's position. And so we can talk a little bit about whether that language includes across the board, all departments, or just the boards, under the select. Just pop through. So
We could just-
oops, if I press it too much, it's going to go 4 slides ahead. But it's a little. The other, well, we lost it, but
The next one is who's responsible for procuring and contracting goods and services.
exactly. So the next are procurement, and we will have a list. I know we're running out of time, but some of the issues, maybe you can scroll through on yours.
Sure.
And talk about it. And so there's procurement is the next, and also we'll be talking about, I'm going to have a list for you to go through and talk about facilities. Because it's important that you start to think about who's ultimately, right, who is ultimately responsible. The schools almost always are going to have separate facilities. But with regard to the other departments, we need to have some discussions. We're going to encourage you to have some discussions about, who is, first, this is contracts and procurement. Let's see, you've got that one up. And currently, it seems like what is happening is that the town administrator is informally working to make sure that they're getting the best deal by combining some of these things in certain areas. So, but also when we talk about the properties and facilities, you're going to be talking about who is right now the town administrator is responsible for use and maintenance of town facilities under select board jurisdiction and informally works with other departments. We'll talk about whether you want to formalize that arrangement and have the town administrator more involved in all of the town property other than schools and maintaining and working, managing those facilities.
Yeah, I think that those are not one of the key ones, appointments, budgets, those are personnel, those are really, most of it, but there's the other resources that a town has. has a lot of property, facilities, and goods in it, procures goods and services. And, that's a management task. And we're trying to figure out, how to do it in an efficient way, in ways that meet the law, and are doing things collaboratively. You don't want one department buying all their office supplies, with one company and then, a couple other going another direction. There's a lot of reasons. It's not just power. It's just really trying to make the process work better. So both town facilities and goods and services and contracting, those are areas that we'll definitely be talking about in the charter. And it's very similar to what we've been talking about. To what extent will the town administrator be given more central authority for those? And if not, what are the checks and balances, or what are the ways in which we can achieve those? So those are all the executive functions that we identified.
So moving forward, we're going to come up with for you with kind of a list of questions that we want you to consider and try to come to some preliminary ideas of what you're interested in changing or accomplishing, and really getting you to start talking amongst yourself about what you think is working and what you think might need to be changed or not changed. We want to leave it the same and say, we don't want to touch this, but we want to do this. We think all the other departments should maintain their, independence, but we think this department should come under the rubric of the select board because it makes more sense. Or I'm not necessarily taking away the role of the committees, but saying some of these functions that we talked about might make more sense to be under the umbrella of the administrator rather than under the.
I have a clarification question for you, because you said two things there. One is come under the umbrella of the select board, and the other was come under the umbrella of the town administrator. Because a function is going to be under the town administrator, does that automatically mean that it's under the control of the select board?
I would say not controlled, but let's face it, the town administrator, you can be the strongest town manager, but you're still report to the select board. They hire you and fire you. And so by nature, any town manager or town administrator has general reporting relationship to the select board. But I think we're talking about more administrative things that really don't require the select board to get involved in many cases. And so I think you can separate the select board from some of those functions and vest it directly with the town administrator.
Okay. So that can be done within the charter so that it's clear. Okay.
Yes.
I think that's going to, as we go into these discussions, I think that's a really important differentiator, because there will be sensitivities to, I think, certain things reporting or under the control of the select board versus not, and town administrator may make sense to, it's just, I don't want us to get all hung up on that, because I think we can make some progress moving forward as long as we differentiate that just because something reports into the town administrator does not mean it's controlled by the select board.
And currently, some of this language is what you see in the special act, where it says the town administrator has control over these functions of the departments that are under the control of the select.
Right.
So when we're talking about, we're comparing all of the departments under the select board with these others. So you're exactly right. The distinction is the town administrator may take over some of these duties, but yet those departments may still not report to the select board.
So
I think you're speaking to what I was asking for that I didn't see yet. Maybe we'll see next time around. The first principles of what powers are being given to those elected boards, so that it's clear why they exist, how they're enacting their will. Maybe their only power was appointment. That's a power. Maybe their power was to consult with the department head. Maybe their power was to define the other rules that shape that board. Whatever those powers were, that to me is when we are clearer about policies and how they're enacted versus powers and how they're, handed out or used that?
You know, it's hard because the general laws have created these entities and they don't give a lot of specificity. But I think the assumption, the presumption is that these independent boards, if they're elected, they have a fair amount of discretion to manage the affairs of their agency. But you won't find that spelled out a lot.
A lot of the time, what I've seen too, just in all of my studying of this, is that it's hire and supervise the administrator that set the budget and set policy. And those are sort of what I've seen anyway, these are the experts, but like the basic sort of function of those.
And that varies over towns, because in many towns, some of these boards and committees are simply advisory to, and the department heads are appointed by the town manager, sometimes approved by the select board. But the boards and committees may be advisory and policy making rather than have any authority over the department head and the employees.
Some powers of some of those boards dictated by state law.
Absolutely. So it really depends on which board is, whether the board's created as part of state law or whether the board is created to do some other things. There are functions, as Mel said, that are specified in state law, and then there are others that can be, I think the trend over time has been to have the town administrator be the appointer of department heads, and have the boards be more involved in the policy part of the decision rather than the day-to-day supervisory. Partially for efficiency, partially so the town administrator can reallocate resources where needed.
But as a volunteer elected board, it's hard to supervise somebody professionally. It sounds like that's
Exactly,
part of what you're getting at.
exactly. Because the town administrator is in the office with this person every day.
And just to be clear, the town accountant and council, I know those were specifically set aside. Is that state law that causes that, or that's just our law?
I handed out this rubric that we talked about of elected versus appointed. You may not get to that in this, you don't have to get to this immediately, except in the executive branch. There'll be another article that will talk about, has to specifically include who's elected. However, this is really helpful. They're all interrelated. It's helpful in your discussion. Obviously, an elected board may have more independence and authority than an appointed board. So you may want to start thinking about the elected boards you currently have, and you have your rubric, start thinking about if you are making changes to the responsibilities and authorities of the boards. Do you then want to start thinking about moving it to an appointed board? But you don't have to. They're independent questions.
And so, next meeting, obviously, we're gonna try to tackle some of these things. I want to have, we had talked this morning about how this next meeting is going to go. And I think it's important have, Mel, especially you, because you know what this stuff is. As we start discussing this, I just don't want us going down a place where, we shouldn't be going. And so I think we're going to need some guidance as we go through these discussions and a structure, which you're going to provide us as to what we take on, what the natural order is for us to have these discussions. So I think before the next meeting, you're going to get the stakeholder survey. It will be just based on what I just heard tonight. There's stuff in there that you're going to want to have in your heads, before we get into these discussions. And the second thing is put a structure, so we can construct an agenda that really helps us focus, because you can go in a whole lot of directions with this stuff, which we just saw. And kind of identify what we want to come out of each meeting with, kind of like at the end of this, we should have defined X, whatever X is going to be. And, you know, the Collins Center can help us figure that out. I have no idea.
Yeah, I agree. We don't want you to focus so much on the detail, the wording. We want you to understand, give us talk about it. And if you have for example, one of the themes is we want to clarify things. We want to, make sure that our processes get in the charter, or, we really want to reform this section. We will help you do that, but we want to hear those things from you. Those are things that we don't want to make decisions for Burlington, of course. So we need you to have that sort of basic discussion, get some consensus around some areas, and then we will work with you how to actually implement those with the actual language and some of the language you might see on your comparative list as well.
So does this mean, what I think I'm hearing is you guys will provide some sort of framework to guide the discussion so that we can have our discussion, you'll be hearing like, cool, that's interesting, but also just so that we can be ready and prepared for the next meeting with some slice of this, because there's obviously a lot here. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Can I request that we get that maybe the Friday beforehand? So all the reading and research we want to pull in, we can do over the weekend?
There's actually a few extra weeks, but there's an extra week.
Yeah, we have a little bit more time on this one.
Making sure we get there, because
I want to make sure we all have time to look everything over before we get into the meeting.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be important. I think we're getting into the meat of what it is that we're chartered to do. So, and recognizing it's new for all of us. And we all are coming in with our biases and our experiences, which are different in terms of our experiences. So, I think that it's going to be very interesting, and I'm not exactly sure where it's going to go, but I know it's going to be interesting how the road will take. So is there anything else before we break up?
We have a next meeting, right?
Yeah, we do. It's,
January 27th,
yeah, January 27th.
which is the day after town meeting, hopefully begins and ends.
Exactly. So we're still the same, same schedule. We're not going to change it. We just changed this one meeting just because we wanted to get it in before the,
Yeah, thank you for the change. Appreciate that.
already, we got a motion to
adjourn.
Second.
all in favor, raise your hand. Thank you. Okay, thank you all.